calling with which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. In this passage, Paul's talking about relationships in the church. They should be living together in humility, gentleness, and patience. This principle, however, applies even more so to marriage.
Oh, sure. Bearing with each other in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace.
So rather than unpacking every little issue, we ask you to, with humility, gentleness, patience, and love, make every effort to keep unity in your marriage.
You may be one choice away from a thriving marriage. Welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast with Bryon and Jennifer Harvey.
Hi, welcome to the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast. I'm Jennifer Harvey, and I'm sitting here with my very handsome husband, Bryon Harvey, and we're here to be talking about some cool things today. It's just, I know that this is just a little bit ridiculous, but we've titled this episode, No Perfect Marriages. We know that that's the truth, but we want to talk today about combating some things in pop culture and maybe some things that have kind of risen up due to the rise of social media and a lot of different marriage advice videos that might not be such great advice.
Yeah, it's meme culture. So welcome back to the podcast for all those who've been listening. And if you're new, thank you so much for joining us. Really glad that you're listening. Memes. Having teenagers in the house, I feel like conversation now happens only in memes.
Are you sure?
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
don't even start. So
that's
if you're
right.
not familiar, there's some meme out there, something to the effect of, I had an interesting day today.
Are you sure?
And yeah,
that's the response to that. And then it's hilarious, apparently.
Apparently it's I don't know. I've accepted that I am not young anymore, and certainly I don't understand the skibbity toilet, Rizzler, Alpha Sigma.
The Wizard of Oz.
We're
right.
in the Great Meme Depression. If you have teenagers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't have teenagers, that's okay. We're going to go on to the next subject. Please don't turn off the podcast. We actually got something relevant to say. Because with memes, one of the things that you may have noticed that there's a lot of meme marriage advice out there.
Oh, that's the truth. And I think that if all people are doing is getting advice from quick videos or memes on marriage, it's not as all applicable and specific and leaves a lot of stuff out and a lot to be desired. There's cute one-liners and sound bites, but it's not just going to help your marriage. As a matter of fact, it can really hinder things.
And I think the most insidious, and the one we're going to talk about this episode, has to do with how much conversation you have about the issues in your marriage. First of all, we want you to know we highly encourage a lot of communication in marriage.
Absolutely. That's so foundational, I think, to a healthy, thriving marriage is making sure that you have that open communication and you're able to discuss things. As we talk about on this podcast and in our book, and at conferences, the idea of your human relationship that's the safest should be that marriage relationship that you have with your spouse.
But to maintain that relationship, to maintain that healthy relationship, you do not have to unpack every issue. As a matter of fact, unpacking every issue as much as the memes say you should deal with every little issue, it's actually destroying marriages.
Oh, sure. And you wouldn't think that kind of at first blush, but, you effectively going in there to dissect every little thing that comes up, it's almost like you're looking for in finding problems that actually don't exist.
Well, or the problem actually does exist, but it's not something that is important enough to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Some things just, it's okay. But if you unpack every issue, one of the things that you're doing is you're creating unnecessary friction in the marriage.
Sure.
The constant, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that, I'm unhappy with this. You're creating this environment where you're constantly arguing or fussing. I mean, fussing over things that aren't necessary. You're creating friction in your marriage that you don't need, that's not healthy. It's not constructive conflict. It's just friction and discomfort.
And of course, it's one of those things too where it creates an unnecessary pressure to fix, because that, I think, implication is there's something broken.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's not always really going to be the case. It might just be a temporary annoyance, and we'll get into some examples in a little bit, but you got to fix this because it's broken, but is it really broken, or is it really that big of a thing? And it also will bury the good things in your marriage as you're trying to uncover some of these things that might not be that big of a deal, that might, again, just be more of a minor annoyance or passing fancy that's not all that important.
Every issue is unpacked down to the microscopic level. You miss the beauty of what's going on and all the good things in your marriage. It's one of those missing the forest for the trees type of things, where I'm so focused on this little bug bite in this little leaf and how this leaf is imperfect, when you've got this beautiful rainforest around you that you're totally missing because you're so focused on this one little thing.
And also, if you feel like you're faced with your spouse looking to unpack every little thing, or you're looking to unpack every little thing that's going on between you and your spouse, that can decrease authentic communication, because who wants to be under that kind of scrutiny all the time? Again, typically one spouse would be the one bringing up a majority of the issues in the marriage, or these little things kind of here and there. The other spouse would then feel overwhelmed and then would just shut down in the communication. And then when the overwhelmed spouse shuts down, the other spouse feels unheard. And it just becomes this vicious cycle where communication stops even if the talking continues. And to me, that's just so insidious, because, again, you're leaning into these memes and short videos trying to, quote unquote, do the right thing, when actually it's wrecking your marriage.
It's from a good intent, but it ends up creating huge problems. Another thing is, unpacking every little issue is also a form of control. It's unhealthy. I mean, we've talked, you cannot change your spouse. You cannot fix your spouse. That doesn't mean you don't address significant issues, but the reality is, if you unpack every little thing, that's a controlling behavior that's unhealthy, and your spouse is not going to respond to that well. It's going to create, again, it's that unnecessary friction that we talked about a little bit ago. We've got to fix this issue and this issue and this issue and this issue and this issue. It's trying to put your spouse in a box of your desires, and it's unhealthy and it's disrespectful.
Oh, yeah, and it's selfish, because it makes it all about you. And of course, your needs need to be heard. Your spouse needs to be looking out for you, just like you need to be looking out for your spouse. But, it's not about being controlling and domineering over your spouse to get them to change. It's how can you be a better spouse? And then you two hopefully working together towards the goals of you both improving your marriage and each being better spouses. The other problem with the unpacking of every issue is it creates these unrealistic expectations of the quote unquote perfect marriage. And no marriage is going to be perfect, I promise you.
Your spouse isn't perfect.
Shocking, and neither are you.
It's something that, this idea that, hey, if we just fix all these little things, it's not going to make your marriage better. Because there's always going to be one more thing. There's always just that one more thing. The goalposts are constantly moving away from you. I do think, inadvertently, we sometimes add to this issue on our podcast, though.
Like you and me?
Yeah, I think so. And we don't intend to.
Oh, you guys, I'm so sorry if that's the case.
Well, so a lot of time we encourage you to talk about issues. It's a pretty common thing for us to say. I mean, go back through our talk about this.
And of course, big things, we don't want you to sweep that under the rug. We want you to address the big issues and the important issues.
But the reality is, if you talk about everything, you're not going to fix anything.
And it seems like that's more going into it with, again, this very critical heart and critical perspective and just poking around at everything and doing the creating mountains out of molehills and, again, creating and seeking problems that aren't actually there. Because talking about everything will end up not fixing anything and causing a lot more problems for you. And I think that really some solutions to this have to be making sure that you're understanding what you want out of a situation. And I think a good example of this, many of you guys know Todd, who is the producer of our podcast, and he's married to a fantastic lady who's a good friend of ours as well, named Bev. So
Hi, Bev.
I'm specifically calling Bev out on this podcast with some very good advice that she gave to me, because I remember when I was expecting our first child, Brenda, I was very sick, and it led me to a point where there were a lot of things that I was unable to do and do as much as I wanted to. If you know me, you know I'm an achiever. I want to get the things done, and it really slowed me down from being able to do a lot of things like, cleaning the house or laundry or chores that I'd normally be doing. And I just said, I'm annoyed. I want Bryon to really step up and take care of things, and I don't feel like he is. And side note, he's working full time and doing the things and whatnot. So I remember just saying to Bev, it's like, what do I do here, right? And then Bev goes ahead and she says to me, okay, what are you looking to do and what's your goal here? It's like, do you want Bryon to clean the house, or do you want the house to be clean? And I just love that, because it's like, well, who else could come in and help? Is this hiring a cleaning service? Is this potentially some friends descending upon the house to help with things? I mean, what's the deal? And I think that just out of that, looking at things, Bryon and I decided to get a house cleaning service for a period of time leading up to that, and being able to do things that I wasn't able to do to kick in there, but just because of my limitations at the time. And thank you, Bev. That worked out in a really positive way.
Yeah, in that situation, it was results-oriented problem solving. What's the goal? What's the outcome that we desire? Not necessarily what's the means. How are we going to do it? But what's the desired outcome? With that in mind, if you want to overcome this friction that comes from unpacking everything, you've got to value connection over correction. If you want a stronger relationship, focus on building that relationship together. Don't focus on fixing or changing, but rather focus on building closeness, building that oneness. Because couples that emphasize connection over correction find they're happier. The reality is, if you could get your spouse to fix every one of those little things that you're constantly unpacking, it's not actually going to make your marriage stronger or happier. It's just going to create this cycle of performance, and this performative aspect of what you're telling your spouse is, you're not good enough to me until you've done all these things. You're not good enough spouse for me until you've accomplished these goals. But when you focus on connection, you're always saying, I've chosen you. You're the one I love. You're special to me, and we can work out these other things down the road.
And with that, these arguments over chores, they tend to decrease. So after a busy day of work, often instead of discussing who's going to do the dishes or feed the cat or walk the dog, if you're in a high connection relationship, one person will usually volunteer to do it. And I know we talk about the idea of, can you outserve the other, right?
Absolutely.
Is there a way we're both jumping in there? I think our cat Freya would love it if we were fighting over who's going to feed her first, right? Or even better, I beat you to it, but I don't tell you by mistake, and then you end up feeding her a second dinner. But
Cats
that's another story.
Cats are manipulative jerks.
Yeah, that's just how they roll, but we love them anyway. In the high connection relationships that you have, in the more high connection your relationship is, those family responsibilities tend to just kind of even themselves out. One spouse might do more chores in the house, but then the other spouse would just end up taking on responsibilities in another area. And it's just about kind of picking up where the other one leaves off, and then everything kind of all comes out in the wash, that it shakes out to being fair and even as the couple would define it.
The research shows that marriages, each couple tends to start specialization. The brilliance of Henry Ford, someone who went to high school in Dearborn, the home of Henry Ford, the brilliance of Henry Ford wasn't that he invented the automobile or even invented a better car. It was the specialization in identifying you could use the assembly line. So this one person is really good at putting on tires, and that's all they do. They don't have to put the whole car together. In a marriage, the similar thing happens where each one in the couple, in a high connection relationship, they specialize in tasks. So everything gets done more efficiently, and it creates more wealth in the family. It creates more free time in the family, and it brings you closer together because each spouse is functioning in an area that needs to be done. But that only can happen if you focus on connection first, not the correction of trying to get the spouse to do what you want them to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say for some of these chores too, again, if somebody's, sick because they're pregnant like I was, or, if somebody is unable to do certain things, each spouse is able to pivot to cover when the person who primarily does it can't. But as you're just getting into more of these specializations, it becomes more efficient. It becomes quicker. Bryon and I will often tell our kids the concept of slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and then you're getting these activities done just a lot quicker, better, easier.
And another thing to help overcome this need to unpack everything or avoid that is to maximize small opportunities to connect.
Yes.
Those little, the holding hands, the fleeting touches, those little things, especially someone whose primary love language is physical touch, those things mean a lot to me. But it's those small opportunities, doing chores together. Some things just are not fun and they still have to be done. Folding laundry together while you're watching a movie. Things like that where you're together and it's these little things, or running errands together. You've got the things need to happen. And so use that time to, hey, let's go grocery shopping together. Let's go do this. Now, that didn't work initially for Jen and I because we have different views on shopping. But
right, do not make this a recipe for disaster, right?
Yeah, my vision is get in, get out, get it done with, where Jen likes to browse and experience the store, which is fine. But the point is, find ways that you can steal moments of connectivity in the everyday moments of life. You should have special moments. You should have date nights. You should have romance that's planned and things like that. But maximize, hey, we can steal a little time together doing this, or just these little things. What is it? Is it that funny meme? We're talking about memes, but is it that funny meme that you can just text to your spouse real quickly?
Or the kissy face emoji.
Or the kissy face emoji. Maximize these little opportunities to connect, to build that connection in your relationship.
And we've also talked a lot over the years about small things in the marriage that are just not a big to-do, and it might be an annoyance, but you're just kind of taking care of it yourself. It's not like, oh my goodness, this is some chronic, horrible issue that means our marriage is coming to an end. It's just like, you're married, you live with the other spouse, there's going to be some things that they do that annoy you, and that's just real. So, Bryon often talks about, how I am a toothpaste monster.
I've never put it quite like that.
No, you haven't used those words. I just use those words because it's funny. So, you can tell the story.
Oh, we've told the story many times on the podcast. But bottom line is, some people do it correctly and push the toothpaste up from the bottom.
Other ones like me apparently mangle this poor tube of toothpaste. It's like, we got to call the police on me for the mangling.
But so the point with this is that's always been that way. We've been married for a long time. We'd been married about 17 years when we wrote our book, and I used this as an illustration in the book, and Jen didn't even know that I was annoyed by the toothpaste.
No idea!
Because I never said anything. Because it's not that important.
It's annoying, but it's not a thing.
And it's not even annoying enough to address. Or things like, there's a dirty glass sitting out. Pick it up. Take it to the sink yourself. You don't need to, hey, why don't you put your dishes away? Some things like that, just don't let those things get to you.
Oh, sure. And I think we can all agree. It's like clean up after yourself. But if somebody accidentally leaves a glass out, just put it in the sink and move on.
Yeah. The keys that got left on the counter because their hands were full because they were bringing the groceries. Just pick them up, put them on the hook, or put them wherever keys go if they didn't get there. Things like that. Don't let these minor annoyances become issues that create friction, and don't have to unpack all. Just take care of it.
Absolutely. And you want to make sure that you're focusing on the good things in your marriage and you don't let the minor annoyances build and overwhelm. Of course, if there's something, to be addressed, if it's a chronic thing, right? You just, mention it, but you don't have to make a big to do about it and just see what you two can do to lighten each other's loads because you're married. And of course, we don't want to say ignore important things in your marriage. And that's the big thing that I really want to emphasize in this episode. Don't ignore those important things, but it does mean prioritizing things correctly and not letting minor things become major things by overthinking, overpacking, over addressing them.
In Ephesians 4, verses 1 through 3, Paul says to the church there, I, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, urge you to live worthily of the calling with which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. In this passage, Paul's talking about relationships in the church in Ephesus, talking about they should be living together in humility, gentleness, and patience. This principle, however, applies even more so, and especially to marriage.
Oh, sure. Bearing with each other in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace absolutely applies to marriage.
So rather than unpacking every little issue, we ask you to, with humility, gentleness, patience, and love, make every effort to keep unity in your marriage.
Absolutely. And the bond of peace. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Operation Thriving Marriage podcast. Please subscribe, follow, like, tell your friends, and we'll look forward to having you join us for the next episode.
Jen and I started Operation Thriving Marriage to help couples and churches take marriages from merely surviving to thriving. We've got our book, we've got a blog, and resources for our coaching ministry, and you can bring us out for an Operation Thriving Marriage experience. For more information, go to OperationThrivingMarriage.com. That's OperationThrivingMarriage.com.